to BINALOT. So yeah, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ian. I'm a Master of Science student here at School of Archaeology, and I will be facilitating today's BINALOT talk. And yeah, I would like to introduce what BINALOT talk is. So BINALOT talk started in 2003 as a way to introduce various topics within the field of archaeology and to explore the different interdisciplinary nature of this field. We invite different guests every week or almost every week to present their research interests or current projects to the community. So the BINALOT Talks is supported and funded by the OBCRD extension grant. So that's why we have coffee at the back. Feel free to have some. And yeah, I would like to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Caroline Schöpf. So yeah, Dr. Caroline Schöpf is an assistant professional fellow at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her main research interests are the colonial approaches to migration
Recording
studies,
in progress.
intellectual imperialism, and academic dependency. She has successfully completed her PhD at Hong Kong Baptist University, where she was a member of the Joint Research Group Migration, China, and the Global Context by the Max Weber Foundation and Hong Kong Baptist University, setting migration studies into a dialogue with the colonial approaches. Her PhD project comparatively analyzes labor market privilege of white Western migrants in Hong Kong. Her work has been published in international journals, and she also convened the 2017 and 2018 workshop, Global South Perspectives Towards Decolonization, Destratification, and Decentralization of Social Knowledge Production. Has organized multiple sessions of decolonial and Southern theory at the American and International Sociological Association, and has been serving as guest editor at Third World Quarterly and Social Transformations, Journal of the Global South. Dr. Caroline also has lived and worked in Asia for 9 years and speaks fluent Chinese and Japanese. So, without further ado, welcome Dr. Caroline Schöpf.
Thank you so much, Bo. Also trying to learn Tagalog. Thank you so much, Bo. Thank you so much again for coming. Very sorry for the delay. So I just would like to focus today on explaining what is coloniality of knowledge, how does it impact various disciplines, how is it linked to the stratification and gatekeeping mechanisms in global knowledge production, and then just outline some rough ideas on what we could do to decolonize knowledge, what suggestions have been proposed. So I want to emphasize that this work has almost exclusively done by scholars from the Global South. It is not my own thought. I'm just putting together various ideas that emanate from scholars in the Global South. I'm also trying to cover a huge amount of ground today, so some areas will be a little bit superficial. Please bear with me. If you have any questions, I'm glad to follow up and give you more details on that. If you want to ask who are the main thinkers or founders of the ideas of coloniality and of knowledge and Eurocentrism, this might be, for example, Jose Rizal, who famously critiqued in his essay The Indolence of the Filipino the idea that Filipinos were lazy and that it was like an inherent character flaw, and instead he analyzed how the misrule and colonial exploitation of the Spanish led to the development of what is perceived as laziness. Then other important thinkers are Aníbal Quijano, Walter Mignolo, and a range of thinkers from the decolonial school, but also post-colonial thinkers such as Gayatri Spivak or Dipesh Chakraborty. I do not have time to review this literature since we're running out of time, but do please read these excellent thinkers. What are these thinkers basically saying? They are saying that knowledge is eurocentric in the sense that it sees the world as what was formerly a perspective of the European colonizers. Now it's a perspective of Europe and the Western settler colonies. it emphasizes achievements of white Westerners, it erases contributions and achievements of colonized peoples or of the global South. It also erases how the violences and exploitation of colonialism and global neocolonialism, global economic exploitation, actually have moved wealth from the global South to the global North. And the wealth there, of course, helps creating more and more achievements that coloniality of knowledge can then highlight as achievements that Westerners did with their own hands work, with their own ingenuity, quote unquote. So the decolonial thinkers have basically said that there are two sides of one coin, modernity and coloniality. So modernity is the bright side of the coin, coloniality is the dark side of the coin. And they say that eurocentrism highlights this modernity, achievement, civilizatory advancements, and hides the colonial violence, the exploitation, the genocides that went along with it. With my non-existing graphic design skills, I made like a light side of the coin and a dark side of the coin that I am putting here. So I want to just very quickly and superficially move through some of the main events or imaginations or movements that can be regarded as parts of the coloniality of knowledge. So one thing here is the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. So the Renaissance, as Mignolo has outlined in his 1992 book, has been celebrated as the rebirth of classical legacies and humanistic thought for the emancipation of the human, and has started a line of thought that announces the modern and the post-modern world, which sees like Europeans as initiating the modern world with rationalism, empiricism, advances to philosophy, political theory, social sciences, saying that the social sciences were put on solid theoretical foundations for the first time. So this is exemplified in Descartes saying, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And of course, the Enlightenment thinkers continue to be taught in social science classes across the globe, also in the global South. And of course, if students see a curriculum that really highlights these white Western thinkers, it will inspire some respect. It will inspire some reverence. Oh, these thinkers must be really good. If it's only white thinkers, they must have been done really great or something. I want to point, I'm teaching the Socsci 2 course. The syllabus I was initially given is only white male thinkers. So the absence of even thinkers like Jose Rizal has some implications, even if it's not even talked about. So what is the dark side of the coin here? So for example, one part here is the erasure of the contributions of the Islamic Golden Age, which makes it seem that the Renaissance and Enlightenment was an act of European thinkers rediscovering Greek and Roman thought that implicitly is perceived as to have seen untouched and forgotten since antiquity, which is not the case. In fact, Islamic scholarly tradition safeguarded and developed Greek and Roman thought, while Europe was oriented towards a religious doctrine in the Middle Ages. And the Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers had access to giants of the Islamic Golden Age, such as Ibn al-Haytham, which invented the scientific method, which is credited to Francis Bacon. The decolonial people are disputing this. Ibn Khaldun laid foundational work for the social sciences and economics, and probably should be crediting with first establishing or inventing these disciplines. And then there was massive advancements throughout the natural and social sciences. Then Walter Mignolo writes that the rebirth of this classical tradition also served as justification of colonialism. In fact, many Enlightenment thinkers, while they think about freedom, liberty, rationality, at the same time describe Europe as more advanced and Europeans as culturally or biologically superior. There were scientific racism, there were racist ideologies, which ended up legitimizing colonialism and slavery. Walter Mignolo says that the Renaissance and the Enlightenment at the same time was a start of a line of thought that announces the colonial and post-colonial. And he talks about this coexistence of clusters, Renaissance having a bright and a dark side, and modernity being the flip side of coloniality and colonialism, and Enlightenment having this dark side of violence and exploitation. So how do we get to these white Western thinkers doing the Enlightenment is what the decolonial people are asking. And they're saying the social, economic, political, and historical conditions of possibility for a subject to assume the arrogance of becoming godlike and putting himself as the foundation of all truthful knowledge, he's addressing cogito ergo sum, was the empirical being that is the subjectivity of those who are at the center of the world because they have already conquered it. Grossvogel elaborates on this and says the central role of European males as the founder of social sciences during the Enlightenment period rests on conquest and colonization, which also Enrique Dussel is saying, I think this should be 2003, and then a killing of racialized people and their knowledges. So he is analyzing especially the Americas and saying first there was an expansion of Western society or Spanish society to the south of Spain, expelling Muslims and Jews from the south of Spain or forcing them to convert, killing or silencing these knowledges. Then there was a genocide of the indigenous people in the Americas. There was a genocide of black and enslaved people and a killing of their knowledges through the transatlantic slave trade. And of course, there was also a genocide of women, which were called witches, and the erasure of the traditional knowledges of women. And for Grossvogel, this is how you arrive at the centricity of the white Western European male claiming to be the holder of true knowledge and irrationality by killing other knowledges, delegitimizing them, not reading them, rejecting them. So that it's not so much an achievement of white Western thinkers in isolation, but at the same time it is a feature of colonialism, is a feature of genocide. Okay, so let's move to the next point, which is the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution is typically regarded as a rising from European ingenuity and brilliant inventions. Wait, I think the Zoom is not connected. Just wait. Sorry, Paul. Oh, it's back? Should I continue? Or should I share? I should share, right?
I'll just switch off the speaker because this is it, right?
Is it shared? Yeah, okay. Sounds good. No, yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry about this, we had a technical difficulty. So again, the establishment of the white European male as the holder of modern rational knowledge is not an achievement of white European males in isolation, but it rests on genocides. Is it again? Disconnected again. No. I can try my hotspot. It worked earlier. If you want. really sorry, Bo. I hope it works now. So again, this centrality of white European male in the Renaissance and Enlightenment rests on colonial genocides, on the killing or delegitimization of knowledge and various forms of colonial violence against non-European thinkers or non-European thought systems. So again, the Industrial Revolution is very often regarded as arising from European ingenuity, and the role of European brilliant inventions is focused on. Sometimes the role of Europeans' quote-unquote superior economic system is credited, and the Industrial Revolution is regarded as a decisive historical event that accounts for Europeans' head start in development, making it sound like the reason why Europe is so much richer, why the settler colonies are so much richer, is mostly to be credited to the Industrial Revolution, which is to be credited to the brilliance of European thinkers and their inventions, technological advancements. At the same time, what is much less talked about, except for the specialist literatures that deal with it, is the inflow from the colonies of precious metals, food, raw materials, surplus value of exploited labors, and profits from unequal or forced trade during colonialism, which served as a huge investment for the new technologies that the Industrial Revolution developed. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly because we're running out of time. So here Quijano also argues that the concentration of capital in Europe because of colonialism gave it the power to position itself as the center of a new world structure and enabled Europe to identify itself as the center, as the locus of enunciation, as the meaning-making center, and re-identify other regions of the world as objects in a subordinate hierarchical relationship vis-a-vis Europe. At the same time, there was an establishment of an evolutionary perspective. So a range of theories emerged from Enlightenment thought that localized Europe's in the modern present or at the top of hierarchies of civilization, while classifying colonized people as belonging to the past. So what is in some ways culturally, societally different from Europe is declared not as different but as backwards or as lacks, absences, or incompleteness. This kind of idea that Europe was somehow more advanced, more modern, and that the other countries should catch up ended up being a main legitimizing idea of colonialism. So this was used to legitimize colonial rule, enslavement, economic exploitation, stealing of land in settler colonies. For the anthropologists among us, I'm not sure if this is relevant to archaeologists, but I think it's relevant to anthropologists. For example, there was a notion that indigenous people in the settler colonies did not do agriculture, or that they did not do real agriculture, and in many places did not do agriculture. This was used to claim that they did not use the land and therefore had no claim to the land, and therefore the land was there for Europeans to take. Some thinkers have argued against this, saying that indigenous people indeed used and cultivated the land, but they used it in forms that were different from Europeans. So either Europeans did not recognize it, or they did not see it as a legitimate form of agriculture, and this then legitimized the taking of indigenous lands through settler colonialism. So this is, there's some interesting information, for example, in Australia, where indigenous Aboriginal Australians cultivated large landscapes in Australia, and Europeans arrived, says it looks really beautiful, it looks like a garden, but they did not recognize that it was indigenous cultivation that made the land so beautiful. So main ideas were that non-Europeans, because they were somehow behind Europe, were not ready for self-governance. So in this way, European colonialism is portrayed as an emancipatory force that liberates the non-European from what Dussel says he's quoting Hegel. So Hegel is saying that these are the non-European global South populations are guilty of immaturity, and is portraying European thought and civilization as a force that can help people out of this immaturity, and is that then colonialism is seen as an emancipatory force that uplifts non-European people, even though colonialism, of course, as we know, was foremost about economic exploitation and had devastating effects on the colonized. And of course, due to colonialism, there was a massive extraction of profits, of money. There was massive humanitarian damage, violence, genocides in the global south, in the colonized country, and this exacerbated the gap of wealth between Europe and the colonies, which further fed back into this idea that Europe is somehow advanced in terms of civilization. So if you look into development studies, they inherit several of these elements. So I highly recommend to read Ndlovu Gacheni, who writes excellent things. He's saying even nowadays, after World War II, the inhabitants of the developing world are still characterized by a range of lacks and deficits, and this idea that the global south is not developed and lacks certain things is then used to justify Western interventions, such as structural adjustment programs. In economic theory, the funny thing that they do, which they do in a lot of disciplines, is they start investigating after the colonial period. They somehow say, oh, we investigate this country, the economic situation of this country after political independence, pretending that somehow what happened economically during the colonial period is irrelevant, should not be studied. They don't talk about it, just start the timeline from there. Then contemporary neoliberal economic theory is espoused as the best choice, leading to optimal outcomes for all economies and countries. So they're talking about maximizing productivity, maximizing GDP, eliminating inefficiency, leading to technological advancements, increasing consumer choices. At the same time, the policies probably do this. At the same time, these policies function to concentrate profits in the hand of a very few. Economic theory admits this and is simply saying other forces outside of the market should take care of economic redistribution, should take care of protection of the environment. And then says, okay, other people need to do it, and then the matter is settled somehow for mainstream economic theory. In real life, the global north has much more power and influence over the economy than the global south. And there's a set of economic institutions such as the World Bank or IMF that can carry out policies in the global south that are influenced by the global north. So this idea that others should handle distribution, the others for the global south are simply not there, or there in only very small ways. So you can and the global north does not. Oh my God, sorry about that. Just wait. Yeah. Sorry about the technical difficulties. The global north also does not appear, or appears to follow economic policies, recommendations very selectively and after careful deliberation, whereas the global south is often forced to follow it whenever they need to urgently borrow money after some sort of crisis from the World Bank or IMF or similar institutions. So some left-wing theorists have argued that economic theory conceals and legitimizes extraction of wealth from the global south to the global north. At the same time, the lack of development, quote unquote, which is due to this extraction of wealth during the colonial period and during contemporary times, is blamed on the global south and is ascribed to unsound policies. And Lovo Gacceni has tried to analyze this as a whole, saying that coloniality of knowledge detonated a cultural bomb among peoples of the global south, invading their mental universe, causing dissonance, alienation, and cultural schizophrenia. He said there was a killing of knowledges, he follows Grossvogel there, imposing eurocentric knowledges. There was a killing of languages, imposing colonial languages. There was a killing of indigenous cultures, initiating cultural imperialism and orientation towards the cultures of the global north, and an alienation of indigenous people, colonized people, from their languages, cultures, histories, and even from their self, instead positioning the Western cultural civilization as the ideal that must be aspired to, but that can never be reached. So I want to very briefly talk about this, how this relates to the systems of knowledge evaluation that we have. So there's a very rich literature on academic dependency. In case anyone is interested, I'm very happy to send you this. People have defined as academic dependency as a condition in which the social sciences of certain countries are conditioned by the development and growth of the social sciences of other countries to which the former are subjected. So Syed Farid Alatas of National University of Singapore, originally from Malaysia, is an intellectual giant who has wrote a lot about this. Here in UP we have Ramon Guillermo, who has also published immensely important work on this issue. People are talking about the core periphery structure of global academia, saying that the academic core influences the academic periphery in terms of idea, media of idea, technology of education, resources. There's a core periphery flow of knowledge, and the academic core does comparative and other country research, whereas the academic periphery is more focused on empirical work, single case studies, and investigating their own country by using theories and concepts that came from the global north. So Pauline Hontonji has also argued that this causes an outward orientation of the periphery to the global north. Scholars in the global south are disconnected and alienated from their own intellectual traditions. The local situation is studied through the conceptual frameworks, theories, concepts of the global north, which are often eurocentric, which are often serving interests of the global north. So there's a fragmented, under-theorized and dispersed study of local phenomena. There's a disconnect of concerns and issues from the global context. Instead, research agendas from the global north, who often might be connected to global northern interests, are followed. And research is published in colonial languages, which might be inaccessible to the majority of the population in the global southern country that this academia is supposed to serve, especially if working class individuals are not fluent in academic colonial languages such as English. Syed Hussein Alatas has also theorized on intellectual imperialism, saying that basically global south researchers are seen as second-class researchers that are supposed to conform, that are being exploited, that there's academic civilizing mission going on. And he has talked about the captive mind, which he says that it's an alienation from important issues of local society, a fragmented outlook. He's written much more. Please do read his work if ever you have time. Then there's other very important works that I might skip through in the interest of time. I myself have identified several mechanisms, just contributing or gathering literature that already exists on this. So the mechanisms that I found are the stratification of conferences, journals, and publishing houses, which means that those venues of evaluation of knowledge are all based in the global north. Then the stratification of research degrees, meaning that most people want to get a PhD, go to the global north. Many of them have a white supervisor. If not, they might have a supervisor was born and raised in the global north, even if it's a person of color. They're trained in an academia that tries to serve a national community in the global north and not in the global south, and they come back. And if researchers from the global north collaborate with researchers from the global south, usually the person from the global north holds much more money, holds all the economic resources, and it can lead to collaborators in the global south being treated as research assistants rather than equal collaborators. And of course, if someone is not a native English speaker, there's an additional barrier to how much this person, to what extent this person's publications, manuscripts get accepted. So these mechanisms, I published a paper on this if anyone wants to see it, but what happens is the global south tries to publish in the global north. The global north looks at it, says the data sets are too small, the English is not good, the theorizing is not as sophisticated, not understanding that there are resources that go into this, or if people from the global south try to use local concepts, try to do things that are relevant for the global south, then you have to argue why this is relevant for a global northern audience. So the problem that we have with academic stratification is that the main journals, the main conferences that are globally most highly ranked see themselves as serving a national community in the global north. So the globally most highly ranked sociology conference or sociology journals see themselves as not serving the global sociology community, they see themselves as serving the US. Then if you want to do something that's relevant to the Philippines, you have to very carefully argue and spend more time and effort than a US scholar why this is relevant to US audiences. If it's not relevant, you get rejected. So there's a lot of mechanisms that leads to scholarship from the global south being rejected at venues where global northern academics would read it and take it seriously. And in the end, it's funneled to journals that are read in the global south, but not in the global north, that are just seen as low quality, predatory, or illegitimate journals. So this stratification of global academia serves to delegitimize a lot of the knowledge that is coming from the global south. So it is read of course it is read in the global south to some extent, but it is not read in the global north, and the global north basically ends up reading only their own scholarly output and only recognizing that as legitimate. So this is actually coming from my SocSci course, but when I saw this, I was really kind of frightened, because what I see here is that the knowledge that is produced everywhere on the globe is basically only mostly evaluated by people who benefit from global capitalism, and is not evaluated by people who suffer under global capitalism, because all the important publishing houses, conferences, journals are based in the global north, and I would say 90%, could be 80%, I don't know. The most people who are doing the evaluation, what is good knowledge, what is legitimized knowledge, what deserves to be published or presented, are people who benefit from global capitalism. So what I think is going on is that the knowledges of those who experience violence and oppression of global capitalism are delegitimized and not led through this academic gatekeeping system that we have. So meanwhile, capitalism continues to concentrate wealth in the hands of a very few, and academia is not doing much to disrupt this process. So you can see here that 1.1% of the global population owns almost half the wealth on the earth. So sorry, this slide doesn't work. This is very, very superficial, please excuse. So the knowledge that is coming from powerful groups, and that is legitimized and valued by global academia, overall paints a picture that the world is just, fair, meritocratic, that Europe is a force for the good, global capitalism is working well, whereas those people who are really suffering globally from multiple axes of oppression, their knowledge is really kept out by this global academic gatekeeping system. If critiques are letting in. It's usually coming from people who are suffering from one axis of oppression, but who are still privileged by other axes of oppression. For example, Marxism, which is a very important tool, still departs from Europe. It departs from the white European worker. Feminism is mostly done by white Western feminists. Disability studies is mostly done by people who are disabled, who live in the global north. Anti-racist theorizing or theorizing on racism is mostly done in the global north by, for example, black US Americans who tended to theorize on a nation-state level, tended to theorize racism in the global north. Nowadays, they're reviving W.B. Du Bois, the transatlantic slave trade, fortunately. Migration studies is mostly done by second-generation immigrants in the global north, and so on and so forth, right? So some critique is being let through, but it is mostly coming from people who are oppressed on one or two axes of oppression, but not on the full spectrum of oppression globally. So the critique thus is kind of scattered and weakened. So what are some recommendations for decolonization? So a very important scholar that we have here in UP, thankfully, says the main problem is really the metrification and neoliberalization of academia. So he's urgently calling, this is Ramon Guillermo, is urgently calling for delinking or opting out of academic hierarchies, stopping to attain high rankings in this academic hierarchy system, instead of establishing autonomous academic communication communities and autonomous social science traditions where, for example, Filipinos talk with other Filipinos, centering marginalized groups in the Philippines on what should be done to solve local problems, advance local concerns in the Philippines without trying to submit in global northern journals, which will force us into, or force Filipinos into Western categories, Western theories, relevances for Western audience, and still reject a lot of papers. Pauline Hotonji said we must also dismantle this orientation to the north, and we must focus on the global south. And then other authors have said, such as Syed Farid Alatas, that we must rethink and localize research agendas, theories, concepts, and we should build traditions from non-Western thinkers and early anti-colonial thinkers. So we could build our own traditions based on Jose Rizal, Ibn Khaldun. Then we have the idea that research must prioritize native languages so that it's accessible to working class communities that the academy is trying to serve. And also he's saying if you do social science research in a different language, it fractures and alienates, scatters what you're trying to do. You're translating your own culture into a different cultural context, and researchers get almost as schizophrenia. So in the interest of time, I have to stop here, and I would really welcome questions. So I'm really saying these are thinkers from the Global South. I'm just summarizing their thought. Thank you so much for having me, and any questions are welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schöpf. We will open the floor for questions. Anyone?
Thank you so much. It was incredibly interesting. I would like to ask you a lot of references to read, including your own work, of course, but also other people that you have cited. I have a few questions for you, and I would also like to invite you to visit an exhibition that we did together with Filipino migrants, and which is now showing in Intramuros, and I would really like to discuss the content with you if you're available. So thank you so much. I did learn a lot. I do certainly agree with, I think, everything you have presented. I have a few questions. So far you talked about the global north, the global south. I think that when you talk about the global south, I would like to make a distinction based on my own experience as a francophone doing research. So I think that we also feel oppression as Francophone scholars by English-speaking countries, basically. And maybe it's not intentional, but what is happening is that the journals in French are not well regarded, even in Francophone countries. And English-speaking journals are regarded as higher. So another thing is that when you talk about, okay, the global north, or who is actually kind of holding the power right now, it sounds a bit like as if it's Europe, and then at some point you mentioned the US as well. So I guess maybe it's also needed to be, I don't know, my feeling is that Europe is completely losing the power, and the US have had it for a while, and this leads to, I guess, my main question, which is, where do you place China and the Middle East in the picture? Because I think that they are also pretty strong, and maybe Russia. Where is Russia in this picture? When it comes to, I guess, oppression in the global balance of power, and I guess that for the academic world I know a little bit more than for the rest, but I would be happy to hear your own ideas about that. And then another thing is that I think that there is also a lot of oppression and neo-colonialism, maybe we can call it this way, within countries. For instance, I've been working a lot with indigenous communities from southern Palawan, and what you said about the justification to take the land of the people because they're practicing a different kind of agriculture or using differently the resources is something that we can also observe in Palawan, actually, with people coming from other ethno-linguistic groups who have actually bought the land where Palawan indigenous people were living, and they couldn't, yes, based on the idea that they were not using the land, but in fact they were using the land to gather wild animals, and also practice slash and burn agriculture. So I would love to hear your thoughts about these aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Other questions?
I mean, I would like to hear what you want to say.
Yeah. Maybe let's gather some more questions from the audience in the interest of time.
I am Edru Abraham, retired professor of art studies. I think every nation who was colonized once upon a time has got to historicize and go through a process of decolonization. And that problem is aggravated by the fact that we are among the longest colonized nations in the world. Not just 3, but 4, if you think about it. 333 years under Spain, well, and not too important, 2 or 3 years under the British in the middle of the 18th century, 45 years under the Americans, and 3 years under Japan. So that process is much more difficult, especially because with the introduction of English, many Filipinos, especially in the elite and the powerful classes, think of themselves as little brown Americans. So that problem is, I think, much more difficult among all the third world countries here in the Philippines. But it's happening. This decolonization is happening. I'd like to take it from the point of view of the arts, just to describe what was going on. Let us say in the late 19th century, a certain form, let us say the Kundiman form was developed. That came from the Italian canta popolare of Italy. The first thing you do is to sing the song, the Italian song or the Spanish song. The next thing you try to do is to see if you can compose according to that form. And then the next thing you do is further experiment until you develop a uniquely Filipino Kundiman form. So that's the parallel. What is happening in the Philippines is, much of the time, masteral and doctoral studies are ways by which you've got a kind of northern skeleton and you try to hang Philippine things on them. And that's your masters. Yeah. But that's a stage. Increasingly, if you look at what's going on, even in history, archaeology, there is more local histories being studied now in the Philippines, all over, than what it used to be. It used to be just the history according to the Spaniards, the Americans, or history from the Tagalog point of view. And so, but your problem, or whatever, your problematique, you yourself answer with this. the work of Ramon Guillermo, who is one of our professors in Filipino, etc. I'm not familiar with Paulino Dantini, but it's on the same track. But what I'm saying is, the artists in the Philippines have been very self-conscious about developing these decolonized forms. And that is why, when you look seriously in the ways of the arts, and I'm talking about all of them, the visual arts, the performing arts, the literary arts, film, etc. It is happening. This kind of decolonization is happening. And that's a good sign. But it must be in such a way that it influences thinking all across the board. It cannot be just a matter of academia or the artistic or the academic classes. It has to be all across the board, especially among the elite who are much too tied up with things north. And so that's very hopeful. What is being done in archaeology, for example, in anthropology, digging into our own past in order to connect it to the present, it's all good. But I agree with you, more has got to be done. But we must also realize that even if we're not thinking about it, it doesn't mean to say that the North is not influencing our thinking. We have to constantly examine these things. Otherwise, para tayong puppet eh. Para tayong puppet na ginagalamay pagkatapos akala natin original na. Yung pala gaya-gaya po tumaya din pala tayo. Walang masama at gumaya. Kailangan na tayong tumiing ng realidad na ginagamit ang ating mga mata. By way of example, when we look at the geography, we call the Middle East, it's not middle from anywhere. That's a European point of view. It's not middle, it's West Asia. But why do we all continue to say Middle East? And then we do a Filipino translation, get ng silangan. Why do we look at the world from the European point of view? And we call ourselves Far East. Ano ba naman yan? Pwede ba naman? Kaya masama yung pagsabi ng Far Eastern University eh. Kung pwede sana sa... Bakit mo sasabihin Far East? You're not far from anywhere. Far East from our point of view is Hawaii. Okay? I think that says it better. That we have to look at the world from our point of view. Being mindful of our history and the influence of history and colonization to our way of thinking. Thank you very much, Ms. Schöpf.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we had another question in the back. Or, yeah?
Hi, thank you, Carolyn, for your wonderful presentation. My question is, don't you think that decolonization is also academic colonization? Maybe, it's not maybe, we have been doing a lot, not just in archaeology, but in other disciplines also. There are many localization of these disciplines, even prior to the concept of decolonization. So we see this in the Philippine studies, in Philippine anthropology, in Philippine psychology, Philippine history, starting decades ago. So, yeah, I just want to share that with you.
Okay, so just curious with, since you've cited Ramon Guillermo's demetrification of academia. So can you expound about it? Like, does he say something regarding to, the situation in UP where our lives as faculty members depends on, the merits and etc. to get tenure and promotion. So I don't know if it has something to do with that, but can you expound on it?
Okay.
Good day. I'm taking it in a point of view as an engineering student. So currently in our field, in computer engineering, we've been mostly using concepts basically from the global north to talk about these technological advancements and to create our own inventions within the Philippines. So as per the recommendations of decolonization, I somehow would like to share that I do think that at some point we could not localize it, but we could rather somehow adapt our own thinking into what has been given by the global north, because it has been causing us advancements, and at the same time if we would be taking it into a local, or rather our own Filipino way, it would take centuries for us to formulate it, rather than formulate advancements within the current time. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe because I have to teach a class, actually, they're kind of starting to wait for me, so sorry, but I'll just very briefly address the questions. So yes, the Philippines have made very big advancement to decolonizing and localizing their knowledge already. So one example is Siholohiyang Filipino, one example is Renato Constantino. We have lots of decolonial thinkers here. So it would, I'm very sorry, I should have really gotten into more detail, detailing all these thinkers. In the interest of time, I didn't do it this time, but this should definitely be the next talk, so sorry about this. For decolonization, demetrification, yeah, indeed, the first institutions to do this should actually be coming from the top of the universities, from the deans, from the administrators, in terms of how do we reward knowledge production by academics, because if academics kill their own careers by trying to decolonize, and they're not rewarded at all for doing so, and then some more conservative academics who do publish in the global northern journals take their spots, it doesn't help anyone either. So we're really asking the Ministry of Education, the deans, the rectors to look into this issue and try to create an incentive structure that really incentivizes people to serve the local communities. This brings me to an important point of power structures. So the coloniality of knowledge and coloniality of power school argues that European colonialism was the single most important event who structured global power relations, but of course it's not the only event. Specifically, you have power relations in the global south. You have, for example, in China, you have populations at the margin of the Chinese borders who you can characterize, if you want to, as indigenous people living under settler colonial realities, if you would like to discuss it like this, who are also being marginalized, their knowledges are also being silenced. You can characterize Russia as a settler colonial state, the whole of the east of Russia. So there is stratification in the global north. There is stratification with English-speaking countries holding hegemony over non-English speaking countries. Of course, you can say that the balance of power shifted from the original colonizing powers of Europe to the US, which is a settler colony, where still white elites hold a huge part, if not the dominant global power. And then, yeah, decolonization efforts have also warned that this toolkit of knowledge that we're creating here can be used by dominant groups in the global south, such as Brahmins in India, to oppress, to consolidate their power and oppress marginalized communities in the same country. So if we want to decolonize, we really have to start from the most excluded communities. So we have to look for the Souths in the South, we have to look for indigenous people, we have to look for Muslims, we have to look for people in the provinces and center their knowledge production, as opposed to the knowledge production of Imperial Manila. I'm not the right person to discuss all this. This should come from Filipinos. But yeah, what you're saying here has also been discussed as one of the dangers in which the decolonial project could be misunderstood and misused, which it does not intend. Okay, I think I have to run to my class, but thank you so much. If ever you have more questions, just write me on Facebook. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. So, unfortunately, we can't ask additional questions since she has to class. And also for the Zoom people, if you have questions, you can maybe direct your questions to Dr. Schöpf through email, or how do you want to be?
Like, yeah, email, Facebook, anything.
Yeah, we can provide the email on Facebook. And also additional announcement for next week's BINALOT talk. Our topic is Food Heritage and Food Biodiversity by founder of Localpedia, John Sherwin Felix.